Hey friends, tonight we descend into something darker. A time of plagues, punishments, and pottage. We're diving deep into what life was really like during the Middle Ages. Forget the castles and chivalry Hollywood sold you. The truth is grittier, filthier, and you probably wouldn't last a single day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see our global fellowship assemble. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft, ambient hum. Together, let's ease into tonight's journey. The Awakening. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1325. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so are the fleas. Your bed is a half-rotted straw mattress, teeming with bugs and hay that smells like a barn floor, because it was a barn floor 3 months ago. There's no memory foam, no pillows, and certainly no Egyptian cotton. Just a single wool blanket, unwashed since last winter, that now weighs as much as a small cow from the accumulated grime. You blink awake as the church bell clangs in the distance. It's the medieval version of an alarm clock, only louder and somehow even less merciful. Your home is a one-room wooden hut with no windows and a charming open-concept floor plan, where your family, your livestock, and your domestic insects all share the same space. And the smell? Oh, it's a symphony of scents. A subtle blend of stale beer, human sweat, goat, and something you pray isn't mold, but know in your soul it probably is. Scented candles haven't been invented. And even if they were, they'd just melt onto your dirt floor. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it. The air is freezing, and your joints ache. You're 22, which in medieval terms is roughly middle-aged. Your spine creaks like an old wooden door, and your knees sound like a bag of rocks being shaken by a confused peasant. Getting out of bed is a gamble. The floor is either wet from last night's rain leaking through the thatched roof, or crusty from something your neighbor's chicken did. Either way, your bare feet are now part of the ecosystem. And privacy? What's that? Your entire family, and maybe a random cousin who just never left, are all waking up beside you. No bedrooms, no curtains, no me time. Just communal everything. Welcome to morning in medieval Europe, where you're never truly alone, because parasites, rodents, and 8 other people are always with you. And this is just how your day starts. It only gets worse from here. The morning ritual. You've managed to crawl out of your medieval haystack of horrors. Now, nature calls. And it's not calling politely. It's screaming. This is the part where you start missing the modern bathroom. There's no toilet, no seat, no toilet paper, no flush. In the 14th century, relieving yourself is an adventure, a social experiment, and often a small public event. If you're a peasant, your bathroom is a wooden bucket behind the house, which is already full because Uncle Wolfstan had a rough night with some bad turnips. The smell is biblical. You hold your breath, do your business, and then, here's the kicker, toss it into the street. Yes, the street. You're supposed to shout something like, Garde-à-l'eau, before dumping it, an old French warning for watch out below. Though frankly, no one ever moves fast enough. The streets of medieval towns are open sewers, a charming river of human waste, animal droppings, and mystery liquids you'd rather not examine. If you're lucky enough to live in a town with public latrines, congratulations. You get to sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers in an outhouse where privacy is a myth and ventilation is a cruel joke. Toilet paper? Never heard of it. Most people use straw, leaves, rags, moss, or if they're feeling especially indulgent, a scrap of wool. Sometimes, nothing at all, which might explain why handshakes weren't popular yet. And in a castle, surely it's better, right? Well, sort of. You might have a garderobe, a hole in the wall that drops your waist directly into the moat. Great idea, except your enemies know this. And yes, attackers sometimes climbed in through the waist chute. Talk about entering through the back door. So whether you're a farmer or a baron, medieval toileting is a ritual of humiliation. It's cold, it's public, it's dangerous, and it's never not disgusting. One slip on a wet stone path and you're face first in humanity's leftovers. And you still haven't brushed your teeth. We'll get to that next. The breakfast of survival. You survived the toilet. You deserve a reward, right? Something warm, delicious, comforting? Sorry, this is medieval Europe. Nothing is comforting here. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a grim affair. No eggs Benedict, no coffee machines, and certainly no avocado toast. You squat near the fire, facing a wooden bowl of something that looks like it was scraped off a muddy boot. Welcome to your daily ration of pottage. Pottage is a thick, gloopy stew made of whatever you can find: grains, root vegetables, maybe a few beans if you're lucky. It's been simmering in the same pot for days, sometimes weeks, with new ingredients just dumped on top of the old. It's less of a recipe and more of an ongoing, edible experiment. On the side, a hunk of bread so hard it could deflect arrows. It's made from coarse rye or barley, often bulked up with sawdust or ground acorns, because wheat is a rich man's fantasy. You don't slice this loaf. You negotiate with it. To drink? You're not sipping orange juice. You're drinking beer. Yes, beer. At 6 a.m. Why? Because the water is teeming with parasites and filth. So you start your day with weak ale, low alcohol, high survivability. Kids drink it, too. No one's happy about it, but at least it won't kill you immediately. Meat or cheese? Dream on. That's for Sundays and feast days, and only if your Lord is feeling generous. Most peasants don't eat meat more than a few times a year. Spices? A pinch of pepper costs more than your monthly wages. Salt is valuable enough to be locked away. So you chew your gritty bread, gulp your medieval beer, and try not to think about the rat that may have nibbled your porridge in the night. Breakfast doesn't energize you. It just happens to you. And now that you're properly underfed, it's time to work like your life depends on it. Because it absolutely does. Dressed in misery. After your sad breakfast, it's time to get dressed. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit. A rough wool tunic or linen shift you've worn every day for months, possibly years. There's no seasonal fashion. There's just wear this until it disintegrates or gives you a fungal infection. No washing machine, no soap. Your clothes are stiff, stained, and scented like a compost pile that's been left to marinate in a pigsty. Your shoes, if you own any, are untreated leather, offering as much arch support as a banana peel. Most peasants go barefoot, through mud, through dung, through medieval landmines of sharp rocks and disease puddles. All this means one thing: your skin hates you. You itch constantly. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs live rent-free on your body. Everyone has them. Lousy nobles, itchy monks, children who are walking insect farms. No one escapes. Your skin is raw, your scalp a battlefield of bites. If you develop a rash, too bad. There's no dermatologist. You just keep on suffering. Now that you're dressed in misery and wrapped in discomfort, it's time to head outside and start working yourself to death. The smile of death and the labor of eternity. Time to flash that morning smile. Except you don't. Because in the Middle Ages, smiling is a dangerous game. Not emotionally, dentally. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no floss. By your mid-20s, your smile looks like something pulled from a haunted crypt. Cavities are rampant, gums are swollen. You have more rot in your mouth than a medieval root cellar. Toothaches? Get used to them. The pain makes you consider pulling the tooth out yourself with a pair of pliers. And that's not a joke. That was the treatment. Dentists didn't exist, but barber surgeons did. Yes, the same guy who cuts your hair is also pulling your molars out by candlelight with an iron hook and zero anesthesia. An infected tooth could easily turn into sepsis and kill you. Kissing? Good luck. Halitosis is everywhere. Your mouth is a battlefield, and it's losing the war. Now that your teeth are throbbing, let's head outside. Because your real job, the one that will break your back, is just getting started. There's no office, no desk, no coffee break. Your job, if you're like 90% of the population, is simple. Don't die while laboring for someone else's comfort. You're a peasant. You work the land that belongs to a lord who probably doesn't remember your name. You rise with the sun and stop only when it disappears. Your tools, a wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, and whatever bones are still intact in your body. There's no weekend. Only sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Sunday is off, but only if you're not harvesting, fighting off raiders, or praying feverishly for your infected toe to stop turning black. The work is brutal. You dig ditches, sow seeds, and carry water until your spine begins to resemble the letter S. No one cares if you're tired. No one asks about your mental health. If you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, well, medieval Europe has a solution for that. It's called being replaced. So you grip your shovel, ignore the blisters, and keep digging. Because in the Middle Ages, a job isn't a career. It's a sentence. A slow-motion endurance test where the only finish line is the grave. Now that your back is on fire from the fields, let's talk about the weather, which is less about seasons and more about ongoing punishment from the sky. Let's start with winter. Forget insulation. Your home is a cage of wind, with gaps in the walls so wide you could throw a chicken through them. The fire in your hearth is a cruel joke. Wood is a luxury, and gathering it from the Lord's forest is a crime. Yes, you can be executed for picking up the wrong stick. You huddle in your one damp wool tunic near the dying embers and still wake up with your nose frozen. Your fingers are so stiff they feel like frozen twigs. This isn't frostbite, a word you don't even know. It's just called Tuesday. Now, fast forward to summer. Sounds better? Wrong. In summer, your hovel transforms into a clay oven. There is no fan, no crossbreeze, and absolutely no deodorant. You sweat through your layers but can't remove them, because showing skin is scandalous and an open invitation to sunburn, insects, and the judgment of God. Flies swarm you, drawn to your unwashed body, and the goats stew still fermenting in the corner. Out in the fields, the sun is a merciless tyrant, baking you alive. Heat stroke isn't a medical condition. It's just called taking a bad turn. So, you're either shivering in your hovel, wondering if your toes will make it to spring, or you're sweating through your only clothes while your thighs chafe into oblivion. The one constant? Your clothes still itch, your food is still terrible, and tomorrow's labor is still waiting. Welcome to climate control, medieval style. There is none. Thirsty? Want to splash some water on your face to escape this fever dream of a life? Too bad. In the Middle Ages, water isn't your friend. It's a patient assassin. Let's start with drinking. That pristine, bubbling stream? Upstream, a tanner is dumping animal hides into it. A village is emptying its chamber pots. A dead pig is quietly decomposing just around the bend. Parasites, bacteria, and the entire microbial army of medieval Europe await in every single sip. That's why people drank beer, even children. It was small beer, weak in alcohol but strong in survival, because the brewing process boiled the water, killing what was trying to kill you. And bathing? In theory, yes. In practice, almost never. People believed bathing opened your pores, letting in disease and demons. That's right. Cleanliness was next to deathliness. You were safer under a protective layer of filth. Even if you wanted a bath, it was a full-scale production. Haul water, boil it, and fill a leaky wooden tub, praying no one used your precious hot water before you. Or worse, after you. So whether it's for your mouth, your body, or your crops, water in the Middle Ages is a gamble. One wrong gulp, and you're spending your final days clutching your stomach on a straw bed, contemplating all the life choices that led you here. Next time you turn on the tap, raise a glass for your ancestors. They didn't have the luxury of hydration without hazard. So, you drank the water. Or maybe you just stubbed your toe on a rock shaped like despair. Either way, you're sick. You need a doctor. Too bad. You live in an age where medicine is just polite torture administered by someone with a theology degree. The diagnosis is simple. Everything, from a cough to the plague, is caused by your four humors being out of balance: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Your health depends on keeping this grotesque internal soup perfectly seasoned. Got a fever? Clearly, you have too much blood. The cure: bloodletting. Let's drain your life force into a bowl with a dull blade or a hungry leech. And yes, the barber is doing this. Imagine a haircut and a near-death experience, all in one sitting. Feeling sad? An excess of black bile. The cure? A violent purge with laxatives, while everyone avoids eye contact and quietly begins carving your coffin. If you break a bone, there is no anesthesia, unless you count passing out from the pain. Surgery is performed with knives that haven't been cleaned since the Crusades. Germ theory hasn't been invented. They think disease comes from bad air or God being personally annoyed with you. Got a stomachache? That's not the spoiled meat. It's your sinful thoughts. The cure? Confess everything, preferably while vomiting. If you somehow recover, everyone assumes it was divine intervention. The doctor takes full credit, the priest praises your piety, and the leech gets promoted. In the Middle Ages, you don't heal from illness. You survive the cure. After a day of labor, lice, and leeches, it's finally time to eat. You shuffle back to your hovel, stomach growling. Bad news. Your meal is probably trying to kill you. There's no fridge, just salt, smoke, and hope. Your meat, if you have any, has been hanging for days, marinated in flies. Bread, the cornerstone of your diet, is often bulked up with sawdust or clay. And if it's rye season, there's a bonus: ergot, a fungus that causes convulsions, hallucinations, and death. It's like eating bread laced with LSD and tetanus. Vegetables mean turnips. So many turnips. Boiled, mashed, or floating in pottage, which is basically a primordial ooze of mystery ingredients simmering since your great-grandfather's time. Spices like pepper are worth more than gold. For you, flavor comes from onions and pain. Most meals taste like wet burlap sprinkled with sadness. But food isn't just a health hazard, it's a political one. The deer in the forest belong to the Lord. Get caught poaching a rabbit, and you could be hanged. That's right, your dinner could be your death sentence. So you sit by the flickering fire, eating your gray stew, knowing every bite is a risk. But you eat anyway, because in the Middle Ages, food doesn't nourish. It tests you. It's evening now. You've worked, suffered, and barely digested your suspicious stew. But don't relax. God is watching. So is the priest. And so is your neighbor Agnes, who will absolutely rat you out for missing Mass. In medieval Europe, religion isn't just part of life. It is life. The church is your spiritual landlord, and you are always behind on rent. Every day is framed by prayer bells. Miss one? Sin. Eat meat on Friday. Sin. Think about your neighbor's wife? Double sin. And hell is vividly, terrifyingly real, described in glorious detail by priests. You can't read the Bible. It's in Latin, a language reserved for the clergy. You rely on the church to interpret God's will. If the priest says your crops failed because you sinned, you get on your knees and pray harder. Tithes, a tenth of everything you produce, are mandatory. Questioning the church is heresy, a crime punishable by fire. So you go through the motions. You chant, you bow, you pray that your soul, after enduring this dirt-caked life, might finally find paradise. Because in the Middle Ages, God may be merciful. But the church? Not so much. And if you thought being a medieval peasant was rough, try doing it as a woman. Imagine all the filth, famine, and fear, but add childbirth, total subservience, and social invisibility. Being a woman in the Middle Ages is playing life on hard mode with no health potions and no restart button. Your life path is set from birth. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband, die tired. Marriage isn't about love. It's a transaction of land and livestock. Your opinion is not required. Once married, you are legally your husband's property. Your job is to produce heirs and not complain, lest you be branded a nag or, worse, a witch, a label that comes with a complimentary drowning. Childbirth is a death lottery. Midwives do their best, but even minor complications can be fatal for mother, child, or both. Survive that, and your work only increases. Now you have a screaming infant in a lice-ridden hut and are still expected to cook, clean, and help in the fields. If you are unmarried, you are suspicious. Widowed, you are vulnerable. Outspoken, you are dangerous. Women who didn't conform, especially those with knowledge of herbs or a strong personality, were prime candidates for witchcraft accusations. In short, a woman in the Middle Ages was expected to endure, obey, reproduce, and suffer in silence. Ideally, while smiling. Because even in a time of universal suffering, women were somehow expected to suffer gracefully. You've battled filth, starvation, and possibly a goat. But just when you think you can't fall any lower, the final specter of your day arrives: violence. Loud, bloody, and woven into the very fabric of medieval life. Let's be clear, the Middle Ages were not peaceful. Law and order was just a prayer that the local lord wasn't in a bad mood. Violence was the air you breathed, in the home, on the streets, and sometimes in line at the communal bread oven. Crime was common, punishment was a spectacle, and justice was more performance art than protection. Steal a loaf of bread? Lose a hand. Accused of lying? A hot poker through your tongue. Gossip too much? Meet the scold's bridle, a metal mask of humiliation strapped to your head, all for your own correction, of course. And if you're accused of something serious, heresy, witchcraft, how do you prove your innocence? Through torture, obviously. Welcome to trial by ordeal. In one version, Your hand is plunged into boiling water to retrieve a stone. If the wound heals cleanly in 3 days, you're innocent. If not, you're guilty and maimed. Another option, you're tossed into a river. Sink, and you're innocent and dead. Float, and you're guilty and about to be executed. It's a divine game show where the only prize is survival, and the host wants you dead. If you are sentenced to death, it's a public holiday. Hangings, beheadings, and burnings are performed before cheering crowds. People bring snacks. It's the medieval equivalent of primetime television. Domestic violence? Completely normal. Husbands were expected to discipline their wives. Street fights were commonplace. You could be beaten for looking the wrong way at a nobleman's horse. And war was always simmering in the background, a constant, low-grade fever of feuds, crusades, and invasions. Violence wasn't a breakdown of society. It was society. Everyone lived with the chilling knowledge that life was fragile, justice was a coin toss, and your neighbor might bash your head in over a pig. So you walk carefully, you keep your eyes down, and you never, ever trust anyone holding a club. You've survived the lice, the leeches, the laundryless misery, and the looming threat of public disembowelment. But now comes the final, inevitable chapter of every medieval life, an early and unglamorous death. If you make it past 40, you're not just old, you're a statistical miracle, a living relic. The average life expectancy hovered around 35, but that number is a lie, propped up by the staggering death toll of children. Nearly half of all children never saw their 5th birthday, wiped out by disease, malnutrition, or a single bad winter. No vaccines, no antibiotics, just a shallow grave. If you survived childhood, you entered adulthood already broken. By 25, your joints creaked like a monastery door. You were likely missing teeth, maybe a finger, and all of your original optimism. For women, the deadliest gauntlet was childbirth. It wasn't a miracle, it was a leading cause of death. No pain relief, just prayer and a straw-stuffed cot to bleed out on. For men, the dangers were just as relentless. A farming accident, an infected splinter, a crusade gone sideways. Death could come from the plague, turning cities into graveyards overnight. Or from famine, thinning out entire villages. Or just from bad luck, like eating spoiled grain and spending your final hours hallucinating at the walls. A funeral was a luxury. Most bodies were just buried quickly to stop the spread of disease. No embalming, no polished coffin. Just a hole, a prayer muttered in haste, and a shallow mound of earth, if there was even space left in the churchyard. In medieval times, life was brutal, short, and constantly under siege. You didn't retire. You just stopped showing up. So, how was your day? You woke in filth, ate despair for breakfast, worked until your spine screamed for mercy, prayed you wouldn't get the plague, and barely dodged a public execution for looking at a nobleman's horse the wrong way. Welcome to a single day in medieval Europe. Still dreaming of being a knight? That romanticized image of gallant swordsmen, noble ladies, and feasts in candlelit halls is a fantasy, a lie polished by centuries of fairy tales. The medieval world was gritty, cruel, and deeply unfair. If you were born poor, you died poor. If you were born rich, congratulations. You had a better chance of surviving, but you were still one bad bowl of soup away from dysentery. Even castles were just drafty stone refrigerators, filled with fleas, smoke, and politically motivated marriages. The simpler times weren't simple. They were relentless. Everything took longer, everything hurt more, and everything from childbirth to chewing came with fatal consequences. Life was survival, not leisure. You lived, suffered, and died within a 10-mile radius of where you were born. But here is the most staggering fact of all. Through this endless gauntlet of suffering, people still loved. They laughed, sang songs, and told stories around dying fires. They found meaning, not because life was easy, but because humanity is relentlessly stubborn. Even in the darkest chapters, they made space for light. So tonight, when you slip into your clean bed, in a home with indoor plumbing and central heating, with antibiotics in your cabinet and food in your fridge, say a quiet word of thanks. For your ancestors, who battled rats, famine, and feudalism so that you would never have to. The following section on Catherine the Great appears to be the start of a new, separate topic and is left as written. Long before she was Catherine the Great, Empress of all Russia, Mistress of Reform, an icon of ambition, she was simply Sophie. Born Sophie Federica Augusta von Anhälterst in 1729, she was the daughter of a relatively obscure German princely family. Catherine was now empress. Not by birth, not by marriage, but by sheer force of will. It was unprecedented. A foreign-born woman with no legitimate claim had seized the Russian throne without a single battle. But her real challenge was just beginning. She had to transform that audacious grab for power into a lasting legacy. Would Russia accept her? Could she hold this vast, violent empire together without falling victim to the same fate as her husband? Catherine understood that power won through intrigue could be lost just as easily. She needed to rule not as a schemer, but as a visionary. And so began her transformation from a careful conspirator to a reforming empress, one who would redraw borders, champion the Enlightenment, and redefine what it meant to be a woman in power. Once Catherine had the crown, she could have rested. Instead, she got to work. She didn't just want to sit on a throne. She wanted to transform Russia intellectually. While her dead husband had worshipped toy soldiers, Catherine idolized Voltaire and the great thinkers of the Enlightenment. She believed in reason, progress, and the radical idea that a monarch should serve the people, even as she ruled them with absolute authority. She didn't just read philosophy, she lived it. She corresponded directly with Voltaire for 15 years. She invited Diderot to her court and purchased his entire library to support him. Behind closed doors, she pored over legal texts, crafting policies to drag Russia into the modern age. Her nakaz, or instruction, was a political manifesto disguised as a legal document, speaking of equality before the law and the abolition of torture. For an 18th-century empress, it was revolutionary. But Enlightenment ideals had to survive the brutal realities of Russia, a vast, feudal land where nobles liked their serfs exactly where they were, crushed beneath them. Catherine walked a tightrope. She was a philosopher queen in public, a pragmatic empress in private. She advocated for reform, but moved with caution, knowing that one misstep could cost her the throne and her life. In many ways, Catherine wasn't trying to make Russia European. She was trying to make Russia modern, on her terms, with an iron hand in a velvet glove. Catherine wasn't content with just reforming Russia from within. She wanted to expand it outward, to make it an empire worthy of fear. Where Peter the Great had opened a window to the west, Catherine planned to knock down the walls. She waged war not just to defend her crown, but to reshape the map of Europe. Against the Ottoman Empire, her armies captured key regions, including Crimea, securing the warm water ports that Russian tsars had craved for generations. With each conquest, Catherine sent a message. Russia was no longer a distant, backward cousin. It was a continental force. She also turned her gaze west, participating in the partitions of Poland. By 1795, Poland was erased from the map, and Russia had claimed vast new lands. But Catherine didn't just conquer with armies. She colonized with ideas. New cities rose from the plains. German settlers were invited to cultivate the steppes. Through it all, Catherine remained the central force, reading reports, issuing orders, and personally overseeing the expansion of her empire. Critics called her power-hungry. To Catherine, it was destiny. A great ruler, she believed, was measured not by ideas, but by borders. For all her brilliance, Catherine was just as famous for what happened behind palace doors. Her private life became a legend. She had lovers, a carefully curated parade of them, often handsome, young, and politically influential. She didn't hide them. She rewarded them with titles and estates if they pleased her, and quietly dismissed them if they didn't. Among the most important was Grigory Potemkin, a man as brilliant as he was bold. Their relationship blurred the lines between romance and politics. He was her lover and, in many ways, her co-ruler. But Europe, scandalized, whispered. After her death, the rumors grew grotesque, the most infamous being a completely false tale involving a horse, spread by her enemies to smear her legacy. But why the obsession? Because Catherine was a woman who wielded power unapologetically. In a world where female rulers were expected to be saintly virgins or tragic figures, she refused to play the part. She lived, loved, and ruled on her own terms, and that made her dangerous. Her love life didn't weaken her rule. It was part of her strategy, a blend of passion and power that made her unforgettable envied, and feared. For all her control, Catherine's reign was not without peril. In 1773, that peril arrived in the form of a bearded Cossack named Yemilian Pugachev. He was no ordinary rebel. Pugachev claimed to be none other than Peter III, Catherine's dead husband, returned from the grave to reclaim his throne from the German usurper. It was an absurd lie, but to Russia's oppressed masses, it didn't need to be true. It just needed to offer hope. Pugachev promised an end to serfdom, land for the common people, and vengeance against the nobles. His words lit a fire across the land. The Pugachev Rebellion became the largest peasant uprising in Russian history. Towns fell, nobles were slaughtered, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed the empire itself might fracture. Catherine was shaken. This wasn't a foreign war. This was a revolt from within. But she didn't panic. She acted. She dispatched her armies to crush the rebellion ruthlessly. Pugachev was captured, paraded in an iron cage, and beheaded in Moscow, a public warning to all who dared to dream of defiance. The empress who once quoted Voltaire now prioritized stability over philosophy. Pugachev had lost his head, but he left behind a haunting warning. Power built on inequality can only hold for so long before the storm comes crashing through. By the time Catherine the Great approached her final years, she had ruled Russia for over 3 decades, longer than any female ruler in its history. She had defied expectations, reshaped an empire, and redrawn the very definition of a monarch. Under her reign, Russia's territory expanded by over 200,000 square miles. She founded the Hermitage Museum, amassing one of the greatest art collections in Europe. She introduced smallpox inoculation, a stunning act of scientific bravery. Yet, her reign was one of contradictions. While she admired Enlightenment ideals, she never freed the serfs. In fact, she strengthened their chains. Her reforms, while impressive, were designed to polish the empire, not transform its foundations. She was called many things: a usurper, a tyrant, a reformer, a seductress. But above all, she was effective. When she died in 1796, she left behind a throne secured, an empire expanded, and a legend that would endure for centuries. Catherine didn't just reign. She ruled with intellect, strategy, and an unapologetic grip on history. In doing so, she became more than an empress. She became a myth. For all her power, Catherine the Great was, at her core, a woman navigating a man's world and remaking it in her image. She was not born Russian. She came to the throne through a coup. She ruled an empire that didn't want a woman in charge. And yet, she not only endured, she triumphed. She wasn't content to simply sit on the throne. She worked the throne with a discipline and intelligence that made her a stateswoman for the ages. But behind the imperial portraits, the empress of all Russia was profoundly alone. She surrounded herself with courtiers and lovers, yet wrote in her memoirs of how few people she could truly trust. Her son, Paul, whom she kept at arm's length, grew into a man she feared would undo everything she had built. Her great love, Grigory Potemkin, faded from lover to friend, and his death in 1791 left a wound that never truly healed. Catherine understood the power of narrative better than any monarch of her age. She posed as Mother of Russia, enlightened philosopher, warrior empress. But beneath those roles was a woman who had endured rejection, betrayal, and rebellion, and simply kept going. When she died in 1796, she left behind an empire transformed, but also haunting questions. Was she a reformer or a tyrant? Were her ideals a genuine vision or just political theater? History remembers her by the title she never gave herself, the Great. Not because she was flawless or kind, but because she took power and wielded it on her own terms, in a time and place where women were supposed to have none. She didn't just wear the crown. She rewrote what it meant to deserve one. In the humid depths of the Chiapas jungle, the ruins of Palenque whisper stories from a lost world. And in 1994, one of those secrets was torn from the earth. A team of archaeologists was surveying Temple 13, a modest pyramid beside the tomb of the mighty king, Palenque the Great. It wasn't expected to hold much, until they found it, a sealed chamber, hidden beneath the structure, untouched by looters for over 1,000 years. When they broke through, the air that rushed out was heavy with the silence of centuries. Inside, a stone sarcophagus rested. As they lifted the lid, a cloud of dust rose like smoke, brilliant, shocking red. The entire chamber was coated in powdered cinnabar, a toxic mercury sulfide. Lying within that crimson cloud was the skeleton of a woman. Her bones were fragile, but her skull still wore a jade mask, her body adorned with necklaces and diadems. The burial screamed royalty, yet no name was inscribed. No glyphs identified her. It was one of the richest female burials ever found in Mesoamerica and a total enigma. They called her the Red Queen, a woman meant to be remembered not through words, but through ritual, color, and the mystery she left behind. The most haunting feature of the tomb wasn't the jade. It was the red dust. A thick layer of powdered cinnabar covered everything: the sarcophagus, the walls, her very bones. It clung like blood to stone. To the Maya, this was no accident. Cinnabar was one of anointing the most sacred and dangerous substances in their world. Its vibrant red symbolized blood, rebirth, and the life force connecting the human and divine realms. To cover the dead in it was a ritual meant to transform the body, preparing it not for burial, but for deification. In Maya belief, death wasn't an end, it was a passage. But there's another layer. Cinnabar is toxic. Its power was volatile, dangerous. To bathe a corpse in it was to declare this person was no ordinary mortal. In Palenque, very few were buried this way. Palenque the Great was one. That detail alone drew a chilling connection. Was the Red Queen his wife, his mother, or someone of equal divine status? Every part of her burial told a story without words, a story of power cloaked in secrecy, of a woman drenched in the color of sacrifice, prepared to cross into the underworld. Surrounding the Red Queen's crimson remains was a world of offerings, each one a tool for her journey into the Maya afterlife, the treacherous underworld of Xibalba. Heavy jade necklaces lay on her chest. To the Maya, jade was eternal life, the green of maize, the vitality of the jungle, the very breath of the gods. A funerary mask, crafted from dozens of tiny jade tiles, had been placed over her face, preserving her identity for the eyes of the gods. Scattered near her bones were obsidian blades and bone needles, symbols of her status as a priestess, healer, or royal matriarch. At her feet, sealed ceramic vessels likely once held food and drink to sustain her spirit. These weren't luxuries. They were necessities for the soul's perilous journey. The tomb feels intimate, not overloaded. It was a map for the soul, a testament to how the Maya saw death, not as a finality, but as a transition of power. The Red Queen wasn't buried to be forgotten. She was being prepared to ascend. For all the grandeur of her tomb, the Red Queen left behind one haunting void: her name. She was clearly powerful. But who was she? The most compelling theory is that she was Tiziak-Buajah, the wife of Palenque the Great. She was the mother of kings, a key ceremonial figure, and her tomb lies just feet from her husband's. The intense cinnabar coverage connects them further. It's unlikely to be a coincidence. But when DNA tests were conducted, the results were inconclusive. There was no direct maternal link between her and Palenque's descendants, but that doesn't rule out marriage. Some argue she was Palenque's powerful mother, who ruled as regent before him. Others, a high priestess whose name has been lost to time. Still, the evidence points most strongly to a queen, a spiritual counterpart to Palenque. The lack of a name may have been intentional. In Maya cosmology, the soul lived on not through monuments, but through ritual and symbol. And so, the Red Queen remains suspended between legend and truth, a woman remembered not in stone, but in scarlet and silence. To understand the Red Queen, we must understand her world, a world where royal Maya women held more power than many realize. They were not passive consorts. They were diplomats, priestesses, and power brokers. Their bloodlines were political capital. Take Palenque's mother, Sakuk. When the throne was left vacant, she took power herself and ruled as queen regent. She wasn't a placeholder. She was a ruler. And she was not an anomaly. Across the Maya world, inscriptions show women performing major ceremonies, engaging in diplomacy, and sometimes ruling outright. By the time the Spanish arrived centuries later, this memory had eroded. The colonial lens saw only silent figures. But archaeology tells a different story. This casts the Red Queen in a new light. Her burial, rich and sacred, suggests she was a central pillar of the royal order. Her bloodline may have been the very glue that held Palenque's dynasty together. In her world, a queen wasn't just a queen. She was a keeper of sacred lineage, a bridge between gods and men. The Red Queen may be nameless, but she was never voiceless. The Red Queen wasn't just buried with treasures. She was buried in architecture rich with purpose. Her tomb wasn't a grave. It was a gateway. Her body was discovered inside Temple 13, one of the smaller pyramids in the heart of Palenque. Yet its proximity to the Temple of the Inscriptions, the resting place of Palenque the Great, is telling. These temples weren't built randomly. Their positioning was sacred, guided by astrology, myth, and dynastic legacy. Temple 13 rises modestly compared to its grand neighbor, but it hides something even more intimate, a secret held for a millennium, waiting to be revealed in a cloud of crimson dust. Part 1. The Crimson Queen of Palenque. For over 13 centuries, she waited in silence. Deep within the heart of a Mayan temple, past a steep, narrow staircase that felt like a pilgrimage into the underworld, her tomb lay untouched. No looter had ever breached its seal. No sunlight had pierced its sacred dark. The chamber itself is a lesson in profound restraint. There are no grand murals to narrate her life, no intricate glyphs to cry out her name. The walls of cut stone are bare, their silence a testament to a purpose beyond mortal understanding. This was not a gallery for the living to interpret, but a crucible for the dead to transform. At its center rests her sarcophagus, a limestone altar echoing the grandeur of her neighbor, the great King Palenque. But where Palenque's lid explodes with scenes of cosmic rebirth, the Red Queen's tomb turns inward. The focus is on the body, the ritual, and the chilling, blood-red powder that gives her a name, cinnabar. Drenched in this crimson pigment, her very bones were stained with the color of life, blood, and sacrifice. The tomb, aligned east to west, mirrors the sun's journey from birth to death, casting her as a central figure in the cosmic cycle. This was not an afterthought, it was a shrine. To be buried within a Mayan temple was to be woven into the fabric of the universe, elevated beyond the human realm. Her passage was meticulously prepared. Jade, obsidian blades, and bone needles speak of rituals of auto-sacrifice, acts of power that would fortify her spirit for the treacherous journey through Xibalba, the Mayan underworld. Ceramic vessels, once filled with sacred nourishment, stood ready to sustain her. Her funerary mask, a mosaic of precious jade, was not merely a portrait but a spiritual anchor, ensuring the gods would recognize her soul. But the most profound statement lies in her placement. Her tomb is nestled directly beside Palenque's. In a city where every stone was laid with cosmological intent, this proximity was no accident. It was a declaration. If Palenque was the sun, battling the darkness each night to rise again, the Red Queen was his counterpart, the moon, a potent, mysterious force navigating her own celestial path. Together, they embodied a divine duality, king and queen, sun and moon, a cosmic partnership preserved for eternity. They speak without words, two souls joined in a silent, sacred narrative. The Red Queen remains nameless, a cipher in history. Yet the reverence of her burial, the richness of her offerings, and the power of her crimson-stained bones tell a story that needs no script. She was not merely a consort. She was a force of nature, a spiritual pillar of a dynasty. Her tomb, once sealed in stone, is now a gateway to our imagination, a mystery that whispers of the immense power held by the women of the ancient world. Part 2. The Shattered Saint of Coyoacán. Before the icon, there was the accident. Before the art that would bleed from canvases and sear itself into the world's memory, there was a girl whose body was shattered into a million glittering, blood-soaked pieces. On September 17, 1925, Frida Kahlo's life was cleaved in two. She was 18, a whirlwind of fierce intelligence and rebellious wit, bound for medical school. She was laughing on a wooden bus when it collided with a streetcar in a symphony of splintering wood and screeching metal. In an instant, her future was impaled. The violence of the crash was absolute. An iron handrail, cold and indifferent, tore through her left hip and exited her pelvis, leaving a wound that would never truly heal. Her spine fractured, her leg shattered, Her collarbone snapped. As she lay broken on the street, a strange and terrible beauty occurred. A pouch of gold powder she had been carrying burst open, dusting her bloodied form in a macabre, glittering veil. Her body became a cage of plaster and steel. Confined to a bed, immobile, her world shrank to the four corners of a canopy. The dream of becoming a doctor, of healing others, dissolved into a haze of infection and agonizing pain. But in that crushing stillness, a universe ignited. Her father, sensing the fire within her, brought her brushes. Her mother rigged a special easel above her bed and placed a mirror in the canopy. There, trapped in her own broken vessel, Frida found her first and most unflinching subject, herself. This was not an act of vanity. It was an act of survival. With every brushstroke, she began to translate her agony into a new, brutal language. She painted not what she saw, but what she felt. Her reflection became a canvas for her reality, a surreal landscape of broken columns, pierced bodies, and defiant, unwept tears. The crash had robbed her of the life she had planned, but it gave her a voice she never knew she had. The girl who wanted to heal others would now spend a lifetime dissecting her own beautiful, tragic anatomy on canvas. From the wreckage of that afternoon, Frida Kahlo did not just learn to paint. She learned to transform her pain into immortal art, forging a legacy as fierce and unbreakable as her spirit. Frida Kahlo did not paint pretty pictures. She painted the truth, and her truth was a landscape of beautiful wounds. This new language, born from the stillness of her recovery, was brutally honest and deliberately unsettling. She rejected polite landscapes for searing self-portraits, not from vanity, but from a place of profound solitude. "I paint myself because I am so often alone," she declared, "and because I am the subject I know best." She hijacked the tradition of Mexican retablos, small, devotional paintings of suffering and miracles, and turned it inward. Her own mangled body became the altar. She depicted herself pierced by nails like a modern martyr, her spine a shattered column in a barren wasteland. She was weeping, bleeding, and fractured, yet her gaze never wavered. It was a stare that dared you to look away. This was not self-pity, it was reclamation. She was taking the ugliest thing that had ever happened to her and forging it into a source of breathtaking, defiant power. In 1928, this firecracker of an artist, still just 21, sought out the titan of Mexican art, Diego Rivera. He was a giant in both stature and reputation, a force of nature painting the grand history of Mexico onto public walls. Frida, with unflinching nerve, interrupted his work and presented her small, ferocious canvases. "Do I have talent?" she demanded. Diego saw it instantly. He saw not just talent, but an unfiltered soul, a voice of raw, unapologetic truth. Their connection was immediate and volcanic. It would become the second great accident of her life. "I suffered two grave accidents in my life," Frida would later say. "One in which a streetcar knocked me down. The other is Diego." Their marriage was a collision of sun and storm. Her parents called it the union of an elephant and a dove. He was a brilliant, beloved, and compulsively unfaithful man. She was a fiercely independent spirit, sharp-tongued and unwilling to be tamed. His betrayals were constant, culminating in an affair with Frida's own sister, a wound that cut deeper than any surgeon's knife. In return, Frida sought solace and power in her own affairs, with both men and women. They were a tempest, divorcing only to remarry a year later, forging a new pact built not on fidelity, but on a chaotic, unbreakable, and mutual understanding. He wounded her, but he also saw her. He believed in her genius, and in their shared storm, they became legends. The 1T930S took them north, to the cold, industrial heart of America. While Diego painted murals celebrating American industry in San Francisco, Detroit, and New York, Frida felt like an exile. A proud communist and Mexican nationalist, she was repulsed by the soulless opulence of capitalism during the Great Depression. She cloaked herself in traditional Tijuana dresses, not as costume, but as cultural armor, a vibrant rebellion against a world she found hollow. While Diego's art grew larger, hers grew more intimate and explosive. Her body, once again a source of immense pain after a devastating miscarriage in Detroit, became her true landscape. It was here she painted Henry Ford Hospital, a work of such raw emotional honesty it feels less like a painting and more like a scream rendered in oil. She lies naked and weeping on a hospital bed, tethered by bloody ribbons to symbols of her loss. A fetus, a fractured pelvis, a snail representing the agonizing slowness of her grief. Her face, as always, is a mask of stoic defiance. Returning to Mexico, Frida stepped fully into her power. Her home, the Casa Azul, became more than a house. It was a living canvas. With its cobalt blue walls, pre-Columbian idols, and wandering monkeys and parrots, it was a sanctuary of her own making, a fortress of color, culture, and contradiction. Here, amid the scent of copal incense, she created her masterpieces. In the two Fridas, she laid her soul bare, a self-portrait of a woman split by love and heritage, one strong and whole, the other with a heart exposed and bleeding. When the European surrealists tried to claim her, she scoffed. They thought I was a surrealist, but I wasn't, she insisted. I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality. As the years wore on, her body became a relentless battlefield. More than 30 surgeries left her encased in steel corsets and plaster casts. Yet, from her bed, she waged war with her brushes. Her art grew darker, more political, more defiant. In the broken column, her torso is split open to reveal a crumbling pillar, her skin pierced with nails. But her gaze is unbroken. She does not ask for pity. She demands to be seen. In 1953, with her health failing, Frida was given her first solo exhibition in Mexico. Doctors forbade her from attending. She went anyway. She arrived by ambulance and was carried on a stretcher to a 4-poster bed placed in the center of the gallery. There, a queen holding court from her sickbed, she drank tequila, sang, and reveled in the celebration of her life's work, a fire still blazing in her eyes. Her last painting was a vibrant still life of watermelons, one slice bearing the inscription, "Viva la vida, long live life." It was her final, joyful act of defiance. Frida Kahlo died on July 13, 1954, at the age of 47, in the same blue house where she was born. Her last diary entry was a piercing whisper. "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." But she did return. In the decades following her death, her voice, once a whisper in art circles, grew into a roar. She was rediscovered by feminists, activists, and all who felt unseen. Frida became more than a painter. She became an icon. Her unibrow, her flowers, her unflinching gaze, they became a flag for resistance, for queer identity, for disability, for turning pain into power, and for celebrating one's own beautiful, broken, and authentic self. Frida Kahlo's body may have been a prison, but her art was the key that set her, and generations to come, free. She did not just live a life, she painted a legend. And it is a legend that continues to breathe, to bleed, and to shout. Viva la vida. Part 2. The Shattered Saint of Coyoacan, The Legacy. In death, Frida Kahlo did not fade. She ignited. The Casa Azul, her vibrant sanctuary, became a shrine. Her diaries, once private confessions, became sacred texts. And the paintings, those raw dispatches from her soul, now hang like holy relics in the world's most hallowed museums. The woman who had lived in the colossal shadow of Diego Rivera finally cast her own, one that would stretch across the globe and eclipse his. She did not just leave behind paintings. She left behind a mirror, and in it, she dared the world to look, not with pity, but with fire. Today, her face is a global language. It is emblazoned on murals and protest signs, on t-shirts and museum walls. Her unibrow, a defiant slash against convention. Her crown of flowers, a celebration of life growing from pain. Her gaze, an unwavering challenge. But the power of her legacy is not in the image. It is in the searing truth it represents. In a world that worships airbrushed perfection, Frida offered a sacrament of the real, messy, contradictory, broken, and incandescently alive. She celebrated what made her different, her disability, her queerness, her politics, her heritage, and transformed it into art that speaks to the outcast in all of us. She has become more than an artist. She is a patron saint for those who live on the margins, for the queer community, She is an icon of living aloud, loving without apology in a world that demanded silence. For women, she is a testament that power is not given, but forged in the flames of one's own experience. For disabled artists, she is proof that a cage of pain can be transformed into a canvas of rebellion. And for Mexico, she is its fierce, folkloric soul, reclaimed and revered, a daughter who painted the nation's heart onto her own. Her canvases are not meant to be simply seen. They are meant to be entered. They are for anyone who has ever felt broken and fought to make the fragments sacred. She lived in the margins and made them the center of the world. She was a communist who draped herself in gold, a woman shattered by betrayal who never stopped loving, a body in pieces animated by an unbreakable spirit. Frida Kahlo never set out to be a symbol. She only demanded the right to tell her own story, in all its agonizing and glorious detail. And in that singular, fearless act of self-creation, millions of people who had never seen themselves in a gilded frame finally found their reflection. Today, when we see her face, we see more than an artist. We see courage made of color. We see revolution in a gaze. We see Frida, not gone, immortal,